20-year-old. I drive a rather beat-up looking 2004 Avalon. My dad and brother are both mechanics. Not my profession, but I've learned a thing or seven from them, and I'm very comfortable working on cars. I'm only mentioning my appearance because it's pretty common for mechanics to assume that I'm an idiot about cars. A while back, I was pretty overwhelmed with life and didn't have a good space to do it, so I took my car in to get the oil changed. The place offered a free-of-charge head-to-toe inspection for any repairs that might need to be made. I knew that my car was fine. I'd pretty recently changed the air filter and brake pads. Rotors had maybe 40,000 miles on them and were in great condition. New serpentine belt, too. Literally just didn't feel like changing my oil, so I took it into the shop. Relevant notes, before I went to the shop, I actually checked my air filter and it was in fact pristine. Also, I usually call my dad while I'm working on my car so he can chat, and he knows about repair and maintenance I've done and that my car is well taken care of. After they changed my oil, the guy came back with the, quote, inspection results on a clipboard and was holding my air filter. He had this grave look on his face like something was wrong. Mind you, this was a very busy place and there were lots of customers in the waiting room. He told me that we needed to go over the results because my car was about to be completely broken down and also not safe to drive if I didn't get several repairs done ASAP because these were all completely shot. The repairs included new brake pads, new rotors, new calipers, to replace the serpentine and drive belt, a new air filter, new compressor or my AC won't work, which is a heavy threat in the middle of summer in Florida, and a couple more generic things. He showed me my air filter that was filled with dead grass, a dead wasp, some dirt, and hair. Bro, you really just scooped some bullcrap off the floor and put it in my new air filter to try and freak me out. The total? About $1,500 worth of work. It would be more expensive anywhere else, but he was willing to give you a deal. So, I immediately started buying myself time by asking basic questions that I knew he'd have to explain, so I could nod at him all wide-eyed while I came up with a good way to respond to what he was doing. What does a serpentine belt do? Is it important? Etc. I texted my dad. I'm calling in a sec, just play along, please. I told the guy, "Oh my god, that's so scary. I can't believe I was driving around like that. Thank you so much for caring. I don't have the money, so let me call my dad real quick to see if he can help me out. I can't afford this." I then proceeded to enhance my dramatic performance by even working up a tear while I called my father. The guy was standing there with me in front of all the customers. I put my phone on speaker and gave my dad a whole sob story about how much I need money again. "I'm so sorry, can he help me?" He asked what the repairs were and how much, and I said, "I don't know, but it sounds really bad. He says that it's dangerous, Daddy. I can't be without a car. What am I gonna do?" Then I asked the guy to tell my dad what the repairs were. He rattles it all off and my dad was playing his part perfectly. "Oh, wow. Oh my goodness. I'm glad you caught this so she's not in danger anymore." Little did this scammer know, he was the one in danger. He hands the phone back and I drop the facade and I start laughing really hard. As soon as my dad hears me, he starts scream cackling into the phone. I said, "Dad, do you hear this bullcrap? Get this, he brought me my new air filter I just put in to show me how dirty it was. He pulled crap off the floor or something and rubbed it in there." Dad and I continued to crack up. The audience in the waiting room was also cracking up. Scammy McCanny was beet red and completely at a loss for words. Head down and some stuttering was his response. I handed him my air filter and told him to go vacuum it out and to make sure to let me see it before he put it back in. I sat and watched him put it back once it was clean, and also watched him pull my car out to make sure he didn't do anything horrible while I wasn't looking. I might have taken it a little far, but I really hate when mechanics take advantage of people who don't know anything about cars. So this felt like a massive win. Big props to my dad for his performance and for teaching me about cars. Big name places and nicer looking shops seem to be the worst culprits for this kind of thing. Find yourself a shop that's run down looking with good Google reviews from the locals. If you see a man wearing a ball cap with a fat dip in it, and his spitter within arm's reach, and a tattooed guy with a distended gut, wearing a singlet and smoking a cigarette, you're at the right kind of shop. I should mention that to add injury to insult, I had a coupon and it was like $25. I'd already paid before he was done. The reaction from the audience was enough compensation for me. Did I go too far with my revenge? Should I have just told him to cut the crap and change my oil? Am I the jerk? Nah, the narrator thinks that if you're going to try and play this game with customers' goodwill and try to scam them out of thousands of dollars of their money, then you don't really get to complain when they drag you in front of all the other customers that you're also planning on taking advantage of. In fact, maybe some of them should be thanking the author. They're going to take everything that guy says with a marble-sized chunk of salt going forward. I do wonder if these professionals would target me, a slim, bespectacled man with my accent, with a similar level of customer disdain and try to wrangle me for more money. Maybe sound off in the comments and tell me if your trade would take someone like me for a ride given half a chance. Also, I love when people of a certain look or personality have an unexpected interest. Finding out that Bruce, the 150-kilo bouncer, is a king of karaoke, or that our petite blonde author is a pretty knowledgeable amateur mechanic, makes life just that little bit more fun and unpredictable. And it stops us from judging the various books of life from their covers. Also, the nerve of scooping filth from the ground and chucking it into your car parts. How do these guys feel good about what they do? There's kind of an unfair observation in the UK that being a mechanic means that most of your job is working out how much you can overcharge little old ladies by. I have to believe what the author says. There must be a few good, discreet little shops silently being honest and doing a good job out there. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Don't want to pay me for my full shift for 7 months? I'll get you fired then. So, this didn't happen to me, but to a friend of mine who works in a different department than me. They didn't want to post it, so I'm sharing it for them. Now, onto the story. It's a bit long, so bear with me. Essentially, this supervisor came into the department and was one of those who wanted to make a bunch of unnecessary changes and implement a host of tedious rules. He'd write people up for being a minute late, for performing a job in a way he didn't like, for breathing in the wrong direction. You get the idea. Anyways, the department he came into was staffed by very senior members who'd been there so long that they were making more than him per hour. Our company has a union and they're all part of it. They'd been through their share of crappy supervisors. It's just a part of the job of the company we're at. Most of the supervisors are crappy because most of them are fairly young and this is their first big boy job, even if it is blue collar. These other supervisors had just kept their heads down and done the work, since none of them could afford to leave. Since these old union boys had been there so long, they immediately noticed when their pay stubs were smaller than before. The supervisor was paying them for an hour less than what they were actually working every single day that they worked. A lot of these guys were making $20 an hour or more, so that's 5 hours a week, ending up with them being underpaid by about $400 a month. Of course they were going to notice. I seriously have no idea how the supervisor thought he could get away with it. These guys, having worked together for so long, immediately came up with a plan. They decided to keep quiet. Let him continue shorting them until the moment was right, as they knew the company would be forced to pay them the missing time, some of it was overtime too, as well as a settlement to keep it out of court if they played their cards right. So they waited. They kept putting up with his crappy rules and attitude and said nothing. They knew the supervisor was trying to get promoted, which is why he'd been moved to their department in the first place. By underpaying them, he made himself look more productive with fewer hours needed. Of course, this made him look like a much better candidate. He kept up the annoying rules and jerk attitude the whole time, which only made revenge the sweeter. Everyone in the company knew he wanted the promotion that was coming up. He wouldn't shut up about it. In the break room, the office, everywhere. He told anyone who looked remotely alive and how he just knew I'm gonna get it. 7 months went by and the supervisor did get promoted, just like he said. That's the moment these guys chose to come forward, and it couldn't have played out more perfectly in their favor. Our company uses a time clock system and each employee has a badge they use to clock in. The supervisor finalizes the time cards in the computer and absolutely everything is tracked. Essentially, this supervisor was deleting their punch-in and starting them up an hour later every day for 7 months. Now, with our system, you can't just delete punches. You have to add comments because, like I said, everything is tracked. So the supervisor would pull bullcrap notes like 1, 2, 3, 4 or some other gibberish to put it through. Every department supervisor also has to keep track of a physical binder that records what the startup time for that night was supposed to be, so that if there's any issue, they can reference the book. So, when these guys came forward, it took less than 10 minutes of digging to pull up everything and see just how badly this guy had messed up. There was screaming, crying, a lot of apologies from the supervisor, but the damage was done. Our up-and-coming young guy was immediately fired, and now all the guys he screwed over were getting back pay plus overtime and a settlement. They didn't disclose how much, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was several thousand. In short, a supervisor underpays his employees for 7 months. The employees exact revenge by getting him fired after he gets promoted. They say that revenge is a dish best served cold, don't they? And this was a cold, icy, calculated move. This is actually so much more devastating than if they'd just got him fired or disciplined early on. They said nothing and let him get closer and closer to achieving his dreams. Heck, they let him touch his dreams before coming in, destroying his life, and taking home a fat paycheck to boot. Again, as a guy who's pro-union, I don't know if I approve of using them as a weapon to destroy a man's life and dreams, and to take way more money off the company instead of just calling in the union lawyer when they realized the problem and nipping it in the bud. It kind of feels like the company would have noticed that they deliberately delayed the union action in order to swipe more money for themselves. And this sort of thing probably is the reason that bosses in the States hate unions as much as they do. Unions should probably just be used to react and defend workers immediately rather than bide their time and damage companies as much as possible. But anyway, I don't like the sound of the supervisor and his crappy underhanded omissions of truth, so we'll call our union dudes jerk vigilantes. I think their actions were probably too calculated to be called a work for good, but this man certainly shouldn't be given a promotion for scamming his employees out of their money. Let's everyone not do this again and move on. Today I messed up by arriving to my mother's family dinner completely undressed. It's not often my family has get-togethers, as many of us live fairly far distances away. But it turns out everyone's schedules just kind of synced up for once. So my mother, being the kind soul that she is, invited all of us, me, my partner, and my brother and his partner, for a family dinner. Now, we live about 4 hours away by car, usually taking around 5 to get there, including toilet breaks, walking the dog, among other things. So, after the long drive, we arrived about 20 to 30 minutes before the dinner was to be served. So I decide I'm going to take a quick shower and then freshen up. This was my first mistake. My mother's house is reasonably small, with 1 bathroom, 2 bedrooms, but it's very homely and cozy. However, it's not the most, structurally sound building in the world. I finished my lovely warm shower and stood in front of the sink as I dried my body and started styling my hair and spraying deodorant. Here's my second mistake. I usually have music blasting while I shower and get ready. It's just something I've enjoyed, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't getting in the dancing mood. As I start dancing around, I feel the floor start to creak. Bear in mind, I'm quite a large guy. And before I could even react, I fell straight through the floor down into the kitchen, where my mum, grandparents, and brother and his partner were all sat at the table waiting for food. I was damp, in pain, and smelled like a god, but also in quite the state of nature. The worst part? I broke my left ankle and couldn't stand up. I had to be helped to my feet by my brother and my partner, while my mother got me a towel to cover myself. I'm currently on the couch after a rather embarrassing trip to the hospital, trying to rest both my ego and my ankle. I'm sure it'll be a great story a year down the line, but in that moment I wanted to keep falling down to the Earth's core. In short, had a shower at my parents' house, fell through the weak floor, and landed au naturel in front of my family. Well, nobody here is the jerk unless your mother had the floors redone recently, because if she did, she needs to take whoever did the renovations to court. I can't imagine how painful and embarrassing this was, both at the time and in the weeks to come, when you had to explain how you broke your ankle to your employers, among other people. But good gravy is it one funny story. I want a camera shot of your kitchen in the minute or so leading up to the moment where you 90-degree Kool-Aid manned your way into the kitchen.
Sweetie, can you take the potatoes off the stove for me?
Sure, Mom.
Are any of the kids allergic to any—
Crash!
Oh my God, Kevin!
Also, I've reread the title of this story, and you really decided to throw us a spoiler-free title, didn't you? If I were to look up synonyms for arrived, I'm fairly certain in no thesaurus known to man would I find fall with some velocity and impact from a recently self-made, non-framed entryway and impact the opposite surface in a destructive manner. You have my sympathy, author. But you're right, the story is hilarious and I hope you're able to laugh at it one day. Karen tries to cut in line at Disney. Sure, I'll get you kicked out right before we get in. A few years back, I was at Disney World with some friends. Disney had just opened up Pandora, the world of Avatar. Needless to say, the line for the flight of passage was insanely long and looped throughout the park. We got in line and waited about 2.5 hours. While we were standing there and chatting, this Karen sneaks in with her husband and 2 kids immediately in front of us. Her kids point out to her that this is not the beginning of the line, and she immediately shushes them and tells them that it's okay to cut the line because they have a flight to catch. The husband doesn't say a word. My friends were about to say something, but I immediately stopped them. My friends looked at me confused, to which I whisper, "Just watch and learn." We stood in line for about 45 more minutes until we were right at the entrance. That's when I decided to walk up to a security guard and told him that this lady cut us in line and refused to go back to the end. I told him that I didn't want to cause a ruckus, so I waited until I found him so he could talk to her. Sure enough, the guard walks up to her and says that she cut the line. She freaks out on him and says that she didn't and she's been standing in line for a while, and he proceeds to ask her how long she's been waiting, and she says over an hour, to which she replies that the wait for this ride is at least 3 hours, so you must have cut in. She was puzzled and frustrated, but realized she got caught, so she finally stops yelling and agrees to leave. As they escort her and her family out of line, I look at her and say with a nice smile on my face, "Have a safe flight." Then I look at my friends and tell them, "That's how it's done, boys." We still laugh about it once in a while. In short, Karen cuts in the line with her family. I made her wait for 45 minutes before getting her kicked out of the line. Am I the jerk for maximizing her punishment? Well, Karen definitely deserved that. I can't say the same about the kids. They gave her a chance to mend her ways, but then followed their guardian like good little tykes. The husband is definitely also a jerk. Just following orders doesn't get you off the punishment for this one, mate. I don't care how beaten down your spirit has gotten over however many years of marriage. So the kids missed out on a chance to get on a different ride because of mummy. But maybe that's just going to teach them the right lessons for later in life. I'll at least give her that she didn't kick up as much of a fuss as a whole bunch of other Karens we get on the channel, at least. We've seen a lot of them dragged kicking and screaming out of this sort of situation in the past, and even a few who've tried to call the cops and ended up getting a fine or jail time before. So this isn't the final boss sort of Karen. This is the villain that the heroes overcome in episode 1 of the Karen Slayers TV series, when they're still finding their feet. 4 out of 10 on the jerk scale, but a jerk nonetheless. I can't sleep in the same room as my boyfriend when I'm at your house? Fine, we won't sleep there. I was a recent college graduate who had made the immoral choice to move in with a boyfriend without getting married. We moved in together in another state about a 6-hour drive from my parents, who lived about 2 hours away from the boyfriend's parents. When we came back to visit, my parents made us sleep in separate rooms and beds because we weren't married. After a visit or two like this, Christmas holiday rolled around. We were planning to be in the state for the whole week between Christmas and New Year's, splitting the time between the two families. We started by spending 2 nights at my parents', then around dinner time the 3rd day, we leave to head to his parents'. My parents are surprised and confused that we're not staying longer. They expected us to split the time evenly. My reply? Well, at his parents' house we get to sleep together, so we want to spend the night there. Bye. Before the next visit, they let us know that they've decided that since we're a committed couple, they will allow us to share a room even though we're not married. Also, in this time period, my sister and her girlfriend lived in my parents' house also, and shared a room, despite there being 2 empty rooms. Once my parents finally realized they were dating, they'd known she was gay for years, they made them sleep in separate rooms. They moved out soon after. I kind of love the clueless parent not realizing that their kid is gay and not having a sleepover stereotype that these parents have apparently carried forward into the other daughter's early adulthood. So I'll say that, somewhat like the story before this one, we have a nice low-stakes jerk story. It's a nice break between the stories of the truly awful people we can sometimes read about. A swift point made and a lesson learned. If you want to see your kids, respect their life choices, as long as those choices aren't hurting them or anyone else. It sounds like they prioritized the company of their daughter over their beliefs about premarital whoopee. I hope they were similarly able to overcome any foibles they might have had about same-sex relationships. If so, they're merely flawed but loving parents, like most. Which honestly is refreshing given some of what the narrator has to read here. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description. Karen says I traumatized her kids by selling them a Ninja Turtles comic in my shop. So this happened a few weeks ago. I stopped at a local comic book shop to pick up a hardbacked copy of The Last Ronin. For those that aren't familiar with the book, it's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles story where 3 of the brothers have been killed, and the surviving brother is on a mission to avenge their deaths. As I'm taking the book... book to the counter to buy it, these 2 kids, a boy and a girl who looked to be between 5 and 7 years old, see the book and ask their parents for a copy. So, as I'm speaking to the cashier, their father approaches me. "Excuse me, my kids were interested in that book. Are there any more copies?" I say, "Yeah, there's one more, but this specific one is pretty violent for kids their age. You'd probably be better off buying them another title." I point to another Turtles book. The mother joined the conversation.
It's Ninja Turtles. I'm pretty sure my kids can handle characters from a Nickelodeon show.
But this one is more in the tradition of the original comics from the 80s. "It's fine, just show me where the book is." "Okay, it's right on that first shelf, but I warned you." So I continue talking with the cashier as the family sit down to look through the book. All of a sudden, we start hearing crying from both kids as they're seeing their favorite heroes on the half shell meet their doom. The father tries to console the kids while the mother angrily approaches the counter.
What is this? Ninja Turtles are supposed to be for kids. But after seeing this book, they'll never be able to look at the turtles the same. This book just ruined my kids' favorite cartoon for them.
The cashier said,
"Ma'am, we tried to warn you that these weren't the Nickelodeon turtles your kids like, and I even suggested a more family-friendly title for you, but you insisted that one. You shouldn't be selling this book in the first place."
And with that, she demands that the cashier let them have 2 different books free of charge to apologize for the emotional stress the kids now had to deal with.
"I'm sorry, ma'am, but you were warned about the book. I can't just give you something for free because your kids are crying. Besides, you didn't even purchase that copy."
Hearing that, the mother tried blocking people from buying anything, but she quickly stopped at the threat of the cashier calling the police. She muttered something about getting people together to boycott the store until it shut down, and then she stormed out. As of today, the store is doing just fine. I guess the boycott didn't go quite as planned for her. Should we have tried harder to stop her? Are we the jerks? Nope, that's on them, and trying to get free stuff based on something you didn't buy is an epic Karen move. You know what gradually dawned on the narrator reading this? The completely plausible fact that similar conversations have taken place thousands of times, just because a lot of people don't understand that not all comic books are for children. And that's been a thing for decades because, as far as I know, Tales of the Crypt and similar books have been going since the early 1940s. So, parents of many different generations have accidentally traumatized their kids with graphic novels for 80 years on the basis that comic books are for kids. You'd think we'd have learned by now. Then again, after working on this channel for so long, the human incapacity to learn shouldn't be surprising to me. You hear that, people? You've jaded me. It's fine. I'm too jaded to care. Forget everything about this place? If you say so, boss, it's your funeral. Many years ago, I worked for a little company. The CEO was a miser of the first order. We needed image hosting for a large client account, and the CEO was unwilling to pay for maybe 2 to 3 grand in annual image hosting fees at the time, even though the company made millions off the deal. Me, being an enterprising individual, figured out a way to host the images on Flickr. I saved the login information in a physical notebook and kept informing them that this is a house of cards and that we really need to switch to a professional service. Several months later, I was promoted and asked for a raise to go with my promotion. The CEO said no, all promotions and raises required CEO sign-off. I tried negotiating, but CEO said no and to leave if I didn't like it. So I left. CEO told me to forget everything related to the job here, and he'd sue me if I did anything with the client accounts afterwards, like sabotage or steal clients. I told him I'm leaving all of my knowledge behind in the notebook in my final email to him, my manager, and I BCCE'd my personal email. In this email, a full inventory of what I left behind, invoices, contracts, among other things, including this entry: personal notebook, account notes and reference material, including image hosting logins for the accounts. Keep for reference, in bold letters. Recently, 10 years after I left that job, I received a professional networking site message from the CEO, telling me to help them with my old accounts or he'll sue me. Apparently, Flickr changed their terms of service and the images were deleted. In over 10 years, nobody updated any documentation or the image hosting. Nobody bothered checking the email account either, the one that was used to log into the Flickr account. I told him that I can't help. Per his request, I'd forgotten everything I knew about the company, and everything I knew was in that notebook that I'd left him over 10 years ago. Seriously though, I don't remember what I had for breakfast. Technical details from that long ago? I just laugh. In short, CEO of old company cheaped out on client solutions and employee compensation. Told me to forget everything when I left, and over 10 years later told me to help him with the same clients, but I'd forgotten everything since then. Yep, my money is on that lawsuit not ever happening. Anyone who threatens to sue that often is either a maniac or just blowing smoke up everyone's butt, including their own. I don't think there's any chance of a court finding against you. You weren't responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of that company's different assets, and hadn't been for a decade. Also, way to run a business, idiot. Give employees no motivation to stick around, promote without benefits, make sure nobody in their right mind would want to take those higher positions, use free services with no fail-safes, not pay attention to them, and demand free help when they inevitably let you down. Step 5. Profit. Oh wait, no, the opposite of profit. I wonder how screwed this company was, or if they miraculously recovered. I'm amazed they stayed in business for a decade, to be honest. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Sure, I'll take your pennies. I was working at a gas station about 20 years ago. One evening, this lady comes in, dumps like 5 or 6 handfuls of pennies on the counter, states her preferred brand. Ordinarily, our cashiers would just tell someone to F off if they were trying this, but I was pretty chill at the time, and I had nothing to do but run the register and stuff my face with food from the deli case. So I reluctantly decide to help her out. I just said, okay, but I'm gonna have to take other customers and I'll count this between them. She objects. It's all there, I counted it already. I reply, if my drawer comes up wrong, I'll get in trouble. I have to count it, sorry. She starts stomping around the store, all mad, throwing her arms around, and I'd later come to recognize this as tweaker behavior. I start counting, meticulously setting the pennies aside in stacks of 10, and pausing every time a customer comes in. All the while, this lady was acting like she'd been stabbed through the hand. Maybe half a dozen customers, and 10 minutes later, I'm nearing the end of the pile. She's standing by the door getting more and more impatient, moaning at everyone who comes through. I was giving the other customers priority, so they didn't care, of course. Anyways, I finished counting and she's short maybe 15 cents? Who could remember? It was fairly common for people to raise the penny dish to cover the cost of a pack of cigarettes they couldn't quite afford, and this was generally allowed, because we lived in a small town and after all, who cares? But she promised me it was all there, and I got a bit of a bug up my butt about it, so I took the overflowing free penny dish and moved it behind the counter before calling her over. You're 15 cents short. Can't I just cover it from the dish?
Where's the dish?
What dish?
There's a dish. There's always a dish. You took it away.
I gave her a puzzled look, waved my hands over the counter. There's no dish. I don't see what you're talking about. She was incensed and cussed me out for a while, and I just shrugged it off. She left without her cigarettes, of course. My boss came over afterwards and told me I didn't have to count those or even take them. He didn't get me at all, but I just played it straight and was like, oh, okay. Am I the jerk? He did not understand that this was just entertainment for you at the end there. Or maybe I'm not sure. You did make a concerted effort to actually complete her transaction in the middle of your other duties, so I don't know that this was 100% malice from the beginning. In any case, by the end of this encounter, your purpose did turn to just messing with her, so we'll declare you a jerk vigilante. Nothing wrong with counting small change in quiet time, though. I wonder if this lady was picking up the pennies from the streets and couch cushions of her life, or whether she had just been saving them for that long. The narrator just used to take all of his small change to the store automated checkouts and pour all of it in to see how much the amount came to. It's a great way to get rid of the stuff. When a new IT department head destroys a department's business just for a fancy email address. A number of years back, I was working for a company that had been around for many years. I was only relatively new myself, but there were still a couple of old guard senior engineers who had been there from the start. The kind that knows where all the obscure, undocumented insider stuff is, and can fix most problems in 5 seconds that the rest of us might take hours to solve. One of the guys in particular, who I'll refer to as Joe, was a bearded and jovial gent with a very Steve Wozniak persona, and was always happy for us to approach him with our questions and welcomed us to leverage his vast knowledge of how the company's sprawling IT infrastructure worked, to make our lives easier and cope with the constant, unrealistic expectations of upper management. He was a real old-school engineer, someone who loved their job and was well respected by everyone around the department. So when his friend, the current department head, a man of comparable knowledge and experience, retired and was replaced from the outside with a young and brash one with a business degree and very little technical knowledge who was also called Joe, it was a big change for everyone. Fortunately for us, he didn't interfere too much with the technical aspects of our day-to-day jobs. At least, at first. When the company first started out, they weren't too concerned with formality when it came to email address policy. In the later years, as the company had grown, they'd tightened the bolts with an official policy of issuing staff with a more formal address code of first name last name at department.countrycode.company.com. But those who were around from the early days retained their original name@company.com email addresses as an alias. It was somewhat of a status symbol and a sign of authority in the company to have one, and those that did would use that version as their sending address and proudly have it in their email signatures and on their business cards. The retired head had one such address, as did Joe, in the form of joe@company.com, and you always knew when you saw an email come into the inbox from someone with one of these addresses that they were someone important who had been around for a while. Most of the department heads were long-term employees who used them, and it wasn't long before the new IT head noticed this aspect of our corporate culture and clearly envied his peers. But as a new employee, he was stuck with his formal email address, and they weren't issuing new legacy email addresses of this kind unless they were for someone way up the food chain. Even as head of IT, he had no authority to claim one. Which is why, when one day he spotted an email from Joe using his legacy address, he saw an opportunity to get what he was coveting. So, as the tale goes, he called Joe into his office and had an exchange that went something like this. "Hey Joe, great work on the capacity report and getting it to me so quickly. We should be able to get approval from finance to expand our storage way sooner than I thought." Joe answered, "Not a problem. Is there anything else you needed from me for it?"
"Nope, everything is here, thanks, but I happened to notice that when you sent it through, you were using a different email address. A little different from the rest of the team."
"Oh, yes, that's one of the ones I've always used from when I started, and everyone here knows to reach me at. Also, some of our older systems and scripts we still use from the early days were hard-coded to use it as well, so I'm still actively using it to get critical alerts and I've got rules set up to forward them onto the relevant team addresses we use these days. Since the only alternative is to budget a major project to go through all of our legacy stuff to change it, and we were never able to get approval for that with everything else going on around here.
I've got no problem with that, but I was interested in getting one of those kinds of addresses for me. It would make it easier for people to, know that I'm the head of this department rather than just another employee here. My predecessor had one, so it should be no problem for me to have one too, right? Can you make that happen?
I'm sorry, I wish I could, but it's HR that makes that decision, and it's their policy to only issue personal addresses at the top of the corporate domain now for C-level recruits and their immediate assistants.
You've been here for a long time. Surely there's a way for you or someone you know who can make this happen.
I'm sorry, it's a decision way above my pay grade. I'd be happy to put a request in for you to the head of HR to see if they could do it as a favor, but I'm pretty certain what their answer will be.
Okay, well, do it and see what happens.
Joe goes and logs the request, but of course the head of HR knocks it back, citing policy and not wanting to set a precedent even as a favor to Joe. Joe goes back to give the IT head the bad news. He knocks and says, "Hey, you know that request I put through to try and get you a top-level email address? Unfortunately, HR have knocked it back. I did my best to try and push it through, but they were very firm on our current corporate policy of not issuing any new ones except for those at the very top." New Joe was visibly unhappy.
I'm sorry to hear that. Are you sure you did everything you could?
Yes, it's out of either of our hands, unfortunately.
Oh, fine then.
And Joe was right. There was no way the IT head was going to be issued with a brand new personal address. However, his position did allow him to authorize the reassignment of existing email addresses to staff, which was normally used to forward mail and alerts still being sent internally to staff who'd left the company. He soon realized this was possible and formed a plan, calling Joe back into his office for another conversation.
Hey Joe, you know how we can't get a new personal email address created, but we can still reassign an existing one onto my name, right?
Joe frowned. We can do that, yes. You have the authority to have the email address of anyone who has left redirected or assigned to anyone else if you so wish. Did you want your predecessor's address? I mean, we can do it, but it would confuse a lot of people if they saw your email coming from someone who's gone.
What about the email addresses of existing staff?
Joe was frowning harder and seeing where this was going. You do have the authority, but it would still confuse people, and you'd be getting all the legacy alerts and notifications, which would make you responsible for ensuring they flow through to the right people when they arrive.
I think I can handle forwarding a couple of lousy emails whenever I see them. I have a greater need for visibility here, and there's no business requirement for you to have one. So start the process of transferring joe@company.com across to me immediately. Let me know once it's done so I can let everyone know.
So, poor Joe was forced to dig his own grave and give up the email address he'd held since day one. He definitely wasn't happy about it, but he did as he was instructed. Falling back on his regular corporate address, he sent an email out to the immediate team and his contacts to let them know what was happening and to please use his full address moving forward to contact him. At the same time, the IT head proudly sent out a company-wide email broadcast letting everyone know that his email address had been updated and he could now be reached at joe@company.com as the head of IT. Weeks went by and it was clear that he was taking every opportunity to send out emails using his new address. New stationery was issued along with business cards, clearly showing his position and contact address. He was clearly reveling in having a coveted address and the prestige and recognition it instantly gave him, especially when dealing with other offices and people who didn't know he was only a relative newcomer. Life was good for New Joe, that is until one fateful morning when he wasn't in his office browsing Facebook like he'd usually be doing when everyone else arrived. Turns out he'd forgotten about his responsibility to forward through important notifications when they came through to him. He'd set up a rule to handle them, sure, but not to forward them as promised, but instead deleting them directly from his inbox without notice. One particular alert dealt with backup failures for a particularly important and long-term defense contract. One of our key SLAs was to ensure daily incremental and weekly full backups being performed on one of those old legacy systems that Joe had mentioned to him both verbally and in writing. The media in an old backup unit had failed and was repeatedly notifying the issue. It was normally a simple fix: replace the faulty media in the backup unit, and restart a full backup run, but with no alerts being sent through anyone, there was a problem. So, when a request came through from the client to perform a restore of the previous week's data after an accidental deletion, the backup team found, to their horror, that no backups had been running for the past several weeks and the data had been lost. The client was not amused. The CEO, with whom they had a close relationship, was even less so. The IT head attempted to throw Joe under the bus when word came around that the company was going to incur a massive rebate for the SLA breach. But Joe, in his wisdom, had ensured that he had done a complete seer when handing over his email address, including email exchanges with the IT head highlighting the importance of the alerts, and to ensure that they went to the right people, including detailed instructions on how to set up forwarding rules and where to send them, all completely ignored by new Joe. HR policy was specific when it came to important email. It was the clear responsibility of the recipient to ensure they were handled accordingly, and the IT head had clearly failed in his accepted responsibilities. He didn't last probation and was gone within the next month. Everyone was wondering who would be getting in the position next. HR and management were tight-lipped on the topic, and there was plenty of speculation within the department about what might happen next. But everyone was smiling when they walked in on the Monday to see Joe sitting in the IT head office. In the wake of what happened, management decided in their wisdom that the IT department should have a head who actually knew something about IT, and tapped Joe to take the seat. He hung on for a few more years before retiring or moving on, but during his tenure he was one of the best IT managers I've ever worked for, and the position didn't change him from being the friendly, helpful and supportive teacher that he was. I was sad to see him go, but while he was still with us, I always smiled when I saw his emails coming through to us from the old, friendly address of joe@company.com, which he had reclaimed and had been returned to its rightful owner. Sounds like the right man for the right job. And at first I was thinking that new Joe didn't seem like that much of a jerk, but boy did he start showing his true colors towards the end. Swanning around, showing off his fancy new status symbol that he's acquired, and then later showing us that he wants all of the perks and none of the responsibilities. Trying to chuck old Joe under the bus as soon as he realized that he had crapped the bed is particularly telling. And thank frick that the veteran had created himself a paper trail so that when things inevitably went to crap, he was able to show exactly who and what had caused the problem. Warned about this issue from the start. As we've said many times, people, keep receipts, especially when you know things could go south like this. It'll help the proper people get blamed and save your job. Good job, Joe. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.